and welcome to the Winchester Archives Supernatural Podcast. I'm Ed.
And I'm Brooke.
Here's a quick spoiler warning before we get going. We are connecting dots across the entire series, so if it's your first time watching Supernatural, or if you haven't finished the series yet, do so before listening to the podcast. This is your one and only warning. Well, I'll probably say it at least one more time like I've been doing, but in general. And finally, explicit content warning. We are adults talking about an adult show that have a lot of dark and sensitive topics, and you better expect adult language at this point. Mature discussion and dark humor, as always.
And this is like where we would do like an episode recap or like a recap of previous episodes that matter. But I don't really have anything to put in here because this is very clearly a filler episode.
Yes.
Or what the writers like to call it, a standalone, which I'll get into a little later. But we don't really have anything to drive the plot forward. Really, all we get is they banter about like finding their dad still. And a couple significant things pop up here and there, but nothing. I don't really have anything to discuss outside of like our normal episode notes for this one.
Yeah, for sure. Because this one's not, it's like you said, standalone in the sense of this could come on at any time and then you can watch it. And it doesn't matter what part of the series that you watch it in.
Yes.
It's not super relevant. So
it's not. So we'll just move to the episode specs. However, first, I just have to say it. You can find us on all podcast platforms and watch along on YouTube. And if you want to support our show, you can go over to Patreon at patreon.com/the Winchester Archives Podcast. I do want to say, because I had someone bring up to me, like, our podcast is so new. Why would you be hosting on Patreon already? I want to say we're not delusional. We know 3 episodes in, people aren't going to be subbing to our Patreon. But we're both consumers of media and we sub to people's Patreons and stuff like that. So we know a backlog is important. And we know promoting it is also important. So, we're just building it up while we start building up our platform as well. So that's why that's there. But there are a lot of perks still. Like we have a Discord server ready to go. We have monthly digital art, which the ones for July were just dropped a few days ago. And it's so cool.
they're really cool.
Yes. And then we're doing bonus episodes called the Archive Addendum. And we're putting that together. That'll be coming out this week as well. And the Archive Addendum, I said in our last episode, that was for our top 2 tiers, but it's actually 3. So only our lowest tier doesn't get it because we have 4 tiers. So yeah, that's what we're doing there on Patreon and why we're promoting it already. And then we have our field research episodes, and that's on our main feed, and that's just our listeners' stories, what they find out in the world for supernatural things. So ghost stories, hometown legends, cryptids, things like that. And you can send it over to us at winchesterarchivespodcast@gmail.com. So for our episode specs, this aired on September 27th, 2005. And it was written by Sarah Gamble and Rael Tucker and directed by Kim Manners. The supporting cast is Amy Acker, and she plays Andrea. And I found out she was on Charmed, and a lot of people, that's pretty much the only reason why people like this episode is because of her.
Fair enough.
And then Aaron Rhoda plays Peter Sweeney, and then the exec producer is Bob Singer. Yes, the character is named after him. And I just mentioned him because I've mentioned some stuff in an interview with him. So this is where Bob Singer in this interview, he explained that people often call this episode Dead in the Water a filler. And he says the creative team didn't even see it that way. So episode 2 was an extension of the pilot because it continued the tone of the main arc and the main characters. And they had developed like an internal system within the writer's corner that there are mythology episodes and standalone episodes. The mythology episodes are for like the overall arc, where standalone episodes are just like self-contained monster of the week cases. And they didn't have a specific budget per episode. Basically, they got a budget for the entire season, and they knew more of the budget would need to go to like finales, like the mid finale and then the season finale. And then mythology episodes would probably require a bigger budget. So the standalone episodes usually would have a lower budget just naturally because they don't need it.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I get what you're saying with all of that, but it is definitely a filler episode in the sense of it doesn't matter at all. You know, it doesn't matter at like even a little bit.
Yeah.
You remove it from the entire series and nothing changes. So
that's true. This episode is the debut writing of Sarah Gamble and Rael Tucker. Both of them were always in the original writing room, but Sarah takes over completely as showrunner for seasons 6 and 7, which
good for her.
Yes, it is good for her, but it's also kind of like meh because that's a lot of time people didn't like the show. Which I know we'll get into more when we get to those seasons, but
yeah,
it's hard to top the original 5 seasons, I guess.
Yeah. It is.
And then Kim Manners, he directed this episode, and he was known for like X-Files. And I guess he was very like meticulous. Like he planned out every single thing. So the crew knew when they saw he was directing, they were like, oh, this is a Kim episode. And they knew what they had to do versus like non-Kim episodes. That's kind of how they broke them up.
That's funny.
Yeah. And he did sadly pass away in 2009. And one of the episodes in season 4 called Death Takes a Holiday is dedicated to him.
That's also cool. That's really nice. A nice gesture.
It is. All right. Now getting into our episode overview. There's another long dramatic recap for 0 reasons.
Yep. You gotta rehash those last 2 episodes just in case.
Just in case.
They won't become relevant to this episode at all.
And we're in Lake Manitoc, Wisconsin, which is not a real place. Lake Manitoc is real, and there's a Manitowoc County, and both of them are by Lake Michigan. So that's that's where they were going from there. So we start the opening scene. We see a lake with a cabin, and there's a family, and they're kind of bantering back and forth. And then we see this girl saying like she's done eating breakfast and she's about to go out for a swim on the lake. And they're like, be careful. And she's like, you know, I will be. And then we see her out there swimming, and she starts getting like super uneasy. And the camera takes a voyeuristic angle, which basically makes it feel like there's a peeping Tom out in the woods. They have us look at her, and it really just adds tension. And you can see her getting more and more like scared because there's like whispers and like ruffling of leaves. And she's like, I don't know what's happening, but she still continues to swim. She doesn't get out of the water.
Which is crazy. If I heard whispers in the middle of a lake that I'm swimming in, I'm getting out immediately.
Yes, you're
none of that.
You're alone in there, and you think somebody's watching you, and there's whispers, and
yeah, nah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And wanted to throw it out there. This because at the very beginning, I remember the first episode you mentioned, there's kind of like almost a 80s slasher feel to some things. This opening is the most 80s slasher thing I've ever seen in my life. From the camera work to the camp to the lake to the voyeuristic shots, like it's just like, wow, this is the 80s all over it. That was my only thought during this opening.
Yeah, it's very like Friday the 13th vibes. And
yeah, exactly.
We even get that more at the end when a hand comes out and pulls somebody into the water. It's like, oh, that's Jason.
Yeah.
But yeah, so poor Sophie here, she gets pulled under the water. And the shot of her getting pulled under the water looks a lot like Jaws. Like the camera's underneath, the
Yeah.
person is swimming, and then it comes up and grabs her. And
That was definitely one of the thoughts I was thinking as well from the camera angle.
they were asked, like the exec producer was asked if that was an inspiration. And his answer was basically that directors, cinematographers, they fall back on what's instinctual to them and mostly like what serves in the moment. And he does know that when they were planning this episode, that wasn't brought up. Like they weren't like, oh, let's do like a Jaws shot. It just kind of
So it wasn't
happened.
intentional. It was just a happy accident.
Yes. But since we've already discussed that Kim is no longer with us, we can't ask him what his thought process was. But basically, he said that like art just builds on other art. So it wasn't
Constantly
intentional.
referencing other things, intentionally or otherwise. Like,
Yeah.
only reinvent the wheel so many times.
Exactly. And there's no need to reinvent the wheel when a shot like that already makes us feel uneasy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what's going up to get her?
Mm-hmm.
Now, after that happens, we switch to the boys' POV. They're in this like small town.
Real quick, before we continue on with the plot, there's actually a little bit of lore that kind of like seemed like it was building on, or like at least brought to my attention immediately. Which like is the concept of one haunted lake, like to see if that was like really a thing. Apparently it is. There's apparently a haunted lake in Lake Lanier in Atlanta, Georgia, created in the 1950s as part of a U.S. Army like project to bring certain power and water to that area. But in order to do so, they had to make a dam, and that dam led to flooding of the area, and this lake basically swept away and was built over top of homes, businesses, and graveyards.
Jeez.
So it's supposedly very haunted. Apparently 600 people have lost their lives there, and there's been numerous reports of like drownings and boating accidents. To be fair, there's also a lot of like rubble and like debris from all these houses, graveyards, and businesses that were in there that they didn't clear out. So that's why like a lot of the stuff probably happening there. But there's been also just reports of like just creepy stuff like that happening. So who knows?
Why do people keep going there?
That's a great question. The only other thing I was thinking of was like any of the other various monsters, like lake monsters that drown people, like kelpies, bunyips, kappas, those kind of things all over the world. There's these like little mischievous creatures that basically lure you into the water and drown you.
Oh.
So it kind of like fit into the theming of this, along with like the vengeful ghost stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting.
But now we can continue on.
Yep. Okay. So the boys are at a small town diner, and Dean, not only is he flirting with the waitress, he's looking at a newspaper to find weird things that are going on. And he finds an article about Sophie Carlton. She's the one that went missing in the lake. And he says this is the third disappearance in Lake Manitoc, Wisconsin this year. And none of the victims' bodies were ever recovered. And he says that's it's a red flag to him.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, if a body just disappears, probably like something.
It's a red flag to me.
Yeah, if nothing else, it's like at least a big monster. In there, big fish, something huge is eating a body.
Yep. So he shows the newspaper to Sam, and there's actually a continuity error right here. When we see Dean circling it, he circles her picture and her name, and then when he shows it to Sam, only her picture is circled.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is great. Like not that it's like probably just like again multiple shots, just like one looked better, one sounded better.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, but that's hilarious that that's like a thing, and like the again, it's one of those things you don't notice until you watch it back like frame by frame.
Yes. I can't even tell you how many times I'm like pausing and looking at stuff and then writing my notes and trying to find these continuity errors and then like double check, like cross referencing, and it's crazy. But that's definitely there. I watched it this time to make sure that was accurate, and it.
You went back and double checked it. That's great.
I did.
I love that.
So Dean points out the case to Sam, but their conversation has a quick tone shift because Sam is frustrated and he has attitude, and Dean is just sick and tired of it. Sam says he just wants to find their dad. He doesn't care about finding all these cases. And he's like, how is this case getting us closer to him? It doesn't make any sense. And Dean is saying this is what their dad would want them to do. He'd want them to continue hunting until they find him. And that's just it. And end the story. Basically. So Sam just kind of falls in line because Dean's not going to budge on this.
Yeah.
It's either they stay together or they split up again.
I don't think either of them want that.
No. And I didn't put it in my notes, but I know it happens here, so I'm just gonna say it. Dean mentions that he's like, I've been with Dad for the last 2 years, like while you were out at college going to pep rallies. So in my head, I'm like, okay, they're sticking with the continuity of writing in the show, claiming Sam was still gone for 2 years. So I mentioned that in episode 1 of how that doesn't work with like standard college, because that's 4 years.
Yeah.
Like he's going to law school, so it'll be going into year 5. So like they're being inconsistent with real world, but in universe, they are staying consistent with that 2-year story.
Maybe Sam's just very smart.
He just skipped grades and stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even think it's possible in college, really. Test out of it, I guess. But how do you test out of law stuff? Like, I'm pretty sure that's no way.
Right.
To be fair, I'm not a lawyer. So if there's a lawyer anywhere that's listening, let us know.
Right.
That's even possible.
All right. So now they get to the town and they go up to the house and they say their names are Wildlife Service agents Ford and Hamill. And
Which is hilarious.
that is an Easter egg to Harrison Ford, Han Solo, and Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker from Star Wars. And then the main kid in this episode, his name is Lucas, for George Lucas. So they just rounded it out, right?
Yeah, full Star Wars episode. I recognize the names from the like when they said wildlife agents, but didn't like put the 2 and 2 together with Lucas as the kid.
Well, now you know. And they're talking to Will, who is Bill's son. Okay, so we have to remember there's a Bill and a Will. We're going to be saying that a lot in this. And then they're talking to Will about Sophie. And Will says Sophie was a varsity swimmer. So like this accident wouldn't have happened. Like she wouldn't have drowned.
Very unlikely, at least. Unless something weird has to happen.
And they're like, hey, can we go talk to your dad? And Will is like, he didn't witness it and he's traumatized. Like, don't go talk to him. Point blank, period. Don't say anything. And so they go to the police station and they're like, okay, the whole lake had a drag and a sonar sweep and there's nothing. So they're talking to the sheriff and he even mentions like the lake won't be a problem much longer. And Dean says, why? And then the sheriff says, because of the dam. And Dean's like, right, the dam, it sprung a leak. And the cop is like, no, it's falling apart and the federal government will not give us a grant to fix it. You should know that, though, being
Yeah.
federal wildlife agents.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, yeah, we did know that, actually.
Yeah. It's so silly that they remotely get away with this.
Right. That's where we learn with them that whatever is happening in this town is escalating because it's smart enough to know it's not going to have much more time. Because once the dam breaks, most of the town is going to flood and disappear and not be a town anymore. Which I don't even know why people are still living there. You'd think they would be telling people to like evacuate.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because it could just, who knows when it's going to break.
Mm-hmm.
But then in walks this woman and her daughter, or her son. And we find out it's the sheriff's daughter and her name is Andrea. And her young son is Lucas. He is nonverbal. He doesn't talk to anybody. And he's very like clearly traumatized. But nobody's telling the brothers why. They're just like, he doesn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
Dean asked Andrea to help to walk them to the closest motel, which she says is 2 blocks away. She's like, you need me to help you walk 2 blocks away?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, why not? So they're just walking and he says, you got a cute kid. And she says, thanks. And then he just says, kids are the best. And you can see like Sam laughing in the background.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
And then when they get to the hotel, Andrea's like, it must be hard with your sense of direction, not even being able to find a decent pickup line. And then she
I love that
leaves.
line. I was like, that's so good.
And then Sam is like, you don't even like kids. And then Dean says, I love kids. And then Sam says, like,
This is all
name
true.
3 kids that you know. And like, he's not able to because he doesn't know any kids. So I think it shows that, like, I think Dean really does like kids. He just doesn't have any kids in his life.
Yeah, I agree. Because even later in the series, again, spoiler warning. Later in the series, when he becomes basically a parent,
Mhm.
it's like the similar kind of like always the brotherly like or like fatherly kind of role that he always takes up, even with Sam.
Mhm.
Just like a very very fitting for his character.
Yes.
Be very like protective of kids.
Yeah, he really is. I love watching him with Ben. Can't wait till we get there. Well, I can wait because it's really tragic. But anyway.
Yeah.
They're in their motel room now, and Sam's doing his research stuff, and he uncovers that people have been going missing around in and around this lake for 35 years. And it's kind of all like sporadic and it's all unexplained circumstances. There's been no bodies. And now it's escalating in frequency. Wait, is that correct? Frequency.
Frequency?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frequency?
When I said
Isn't like more often?
when I said escalating in frequency, I was like, is that the correct way to say that? Like, it's what I wrote.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a pattern we see throughout the series as well, because like the monsters or ghosts get stronger and more angry the longer its unfinished business happens.
Yep.
In this research time, Dean and Sam learn that about Christopher Barr, and that's Andrea's late husband. So he drowned in the lake, and their son, Lucas, witnessed it and was left alone in the water for 2 hours before he was rescued.
Poor buddy.
I know. I'm like, no wonder he doesn't talk. I wouldn't talk
no
either.
Yeah.
So Dean says at this point, you never get over watching your parent die.
Mm-hmm.
That is like a little bit of like plot I think this episode gives. Dean talks a lot about like the trauma with watching his mom die.
Yeah.
So they go to the park where they know Andrea took Lucas. Dean says, mind if I say hi to your kid? And then he doesn't even let Andrea say yes. He just goes over there. And he's aware he probably won't get a response at all, but he still is talking to him. And we kind of see Dean's inner softness, especially towards children. He talks very gently. His body language is non-threatening, and he is very charismatic. So he starts to build like a rapport. And he points out this army man, and he tells Lucas, like, I loved these as a kid, which is a plot hook. Because at the last episode of season 5, they use that again because it's in the ashtray of the Impala.
Yeah.
So I like that they kept that.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I love that little Easter egg like that. But yeah, I think it's a really sweet way of showing it too, because also like the kid's like not talking to anyone and then like just opens up to a stranger basically.
Mm-hmm.
Is really cool, you know, because of like you said, how like non-threatening he is and how friendly he is.
Mm-hmm. And he basically tells Lucas that he knows he's scared, and he says like he saw something when he was young too. So he understands and he'll believe anything Lucas tells him, and there won't be any judgment. In my notes, I had to be petty because he actually says, I saw something too when I was your age. And I was like, this Lucas is older than 4. Dean was 4 when he watched his mom die. So that is not truthful. But in the end, that doesn't matter.
That's hilarious.
So Dean leaves thinking he didn't really have an impact on Lucas, and they all have to go like another route, basically. And then Lucas actually approaches them and hands Dean a drawing of a house. And that kind of just shows like a huge moment of trust, because even Andrea says that Lucas won't even talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go back to the POV of Bill and Will. Bill, I almost mixed it up myself. Bill is in his living room chair and he does not look right. So like, I know he's mourning his daughter, but when I watched this back, I was like, he looks worse than somebody who is grief stricken. Like he knows something else is happening. Like he just feels haunted and unsettled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And his son pops his head in and he's like, Dad, you really need to eat something. I'm going to make you dinner. Bill doesn't say anything because he's just like dissociating. So Will goes into the kitchen. He starts prepping dinner. The sink water turns on by itself. And then it turns like dark brown, which is disgusting. And it's a visual cue for us as watchers to know like this is supernatural.
You know, like that's the bad thing.
Yeah.
Not actually a demon in this case, but like that's the bad guy.
Yeah. Then the water continues to rise on its own, filling the sink. And despite this happening, Will does what everybody else in a movie would do, and he puts his hand in it.
I love this kill in this. But I just love it's really horrifying. The thought of, you know what I mean? Like, cause that's why it's so good, is because it's something that we can kind of all commiserate with the feeling of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like everyone knows how it feels to stick your hand into the drain like that.
Yeah.
And, like the thought of like getting pulled in like that is just a horrifying thought.
Yes, exactly.
It's so good. And the camera shots are really well done on this.
They are. I like it too. He just assumes it's a clog. So he reaches into the dark water to pull it out. And then the ghost drowns him in the gross sink water, the brown sink water. This is another continuity error, because on the shot before, when you see the sink filling, the plug is on the basin of the sink. But when the sink is full, Will pulls out the plug from the drain to try to drain it, and then the water doesn't go down.
That's funny.
So I don't know which one they really were heading for. Like, as I was thinking about this, I was like, well, did they want the sink to fill up without it plugged? Or was he supposed to plug it and then it was supposed to fill up and then he would unplug it and then it wouldn't drain? Like, I'm like, what direction were they trying?
Yeah.
Because both happened at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Again, these things that I've never would have noticed.
I think this one is very obvious.
You have to show me after this.
Yes, I will. So then we switch POV back to the boys. And Sam walks in. It's serious, but also kind of a joke. He's like, well, we can roll out Nessie because Will drowned in a sink. So they're like, okay, it has to be a spirit that can like control the pipes of water. And if it's from the lake, that means the whole town. Basically, this thing has access to everybody.
Yeah.
And then they hypothesize again that time is running out. So now it's just kind of like killing people in succession. And they know Bill has something to do with it because now both of his kids are dead and his son-in-law it's his godson. Those two kids and his godson are dead. And so they go there to talk to him and he doesn't want to talk. He says, my kids being gone, it's worse than dying. And then he basically tells them to leave. And they do. And Sam says, like, hey, what did you think of that interaction? And Dean says, like, well, obviously the poor guy has been through hell, but he's not telling us everything. And then Dean takes out Lucas's drawing and sees that he drew Bill's cabin. So, right. So it's suggesting Lucas knew something was going to happen there before it happened, or he's like somehow connected to the entity that's happening.
Either that or he's just like, because like, wasn't that where he also had the trauma from his parents dying? Was that lake? I mean,
No.
like, how would he know? Like, you're right. How would he know otherwise? It has to be something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know it is like a trope in some movies, at least, that kind of like the nonverbal child is like the one that has like some psychic abilities, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I know I tried to look into it a little bit into that, but the only thing I could really find was just like the kind of like general theming in a lot of stories and folklore of like the main hero having to go through some trauma or some like trial to like become a hero, to become better, to become special. And like it's something that's like done a lot in like comic books and like superheroes as well, like Deadpool's kind of thing, where it's like you have to go through a lot of trauma to get like a superpower kind of thing. And that's kind of what happened here with Lucas as well, going through all that trauma, and then he kind of got like psychic powers, or kind of, like you said, connected with the entity or something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it makes me wonder like why, like what happened to him in those 2 hours he was out there on the lake on his own.
Yeah.
So with all of this information, Sam and Dean visit Andrea's house, and Dean asks to speak with Lucas, and Andrea's like, he's not going to talk to you. This is like a waste of time. And Dean is like, something else is happening here. So if you can look at me in the eye and tell me that you don't think something crazy is happening, then I'll leave. And then the next camera shot is of him like walking into Lucas's room, because she's like, okay, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
He's again surrounded by the Green Army men. So I looked that up, and the toy soldiers in like dreams and in trauma interpretations represent like spiritual forgiveness and a deserved outcome of something. And it could also just be like a sense of protection because you're surrounded by a soldier, things like that.
All of those kind of fit with this whole theme of this episode. So, like the whole deserved outcome and spiritual forgiveness thing.
Yes, it does. And Lucas keeps drawing bicycles just all over the place. And then he gives Dean a picture of a house and a church and a bicycle. Before I knew what was going on, I wrote down that bicycles represent like forward momentum and healing, the desire to escape past.
Very
Which,
fitting again for what's going on, but also literally.
yeah,
Bicycle.
it has a literal, they're literally looking for a bike. After I did that research on what bicycles represent, like symbolically, I was like, oh, this is literal. That's okay,
Hey,
though.
it still works again spiritually.
It does.
Or like metaphorically as well.
Yeah. But Lucas doesn't answer how he knew that was Bill's house. He just draws more stuff to show he trusts Dean. But Dean does open up to Lucas again. He says that like he knows he's scared. And when his mom died, he was scared, but he knew his mom wouldn't want him to be. And basically, you have to stop being scared to help other people. So that's, again, when he gets the picture of the house and the church and the bike. Andrea does say he didn't have this kind of drawing until after her husband died. So that just kind of like implies, again, he had some kind of experience that led to some kind of psychic connection or some post-traumatic clairvoyance. And Sam does bring that up when him and Dean are in the car. He's talking about this, but he doesn't really believe it. He's still like skeptical. He's like, how can we trust what this kid is giving us? And Dean says they don't have any other leads. So, if Sam has another lead to say it, and if not, this is the best they have for now.
True.
Mm-hmm. But Dean's biggest problem here is he's like, there's 1,000 houses around here that look just like this. And Sam says, see that church? I bet there's less than 1,000 of those. And then Dean like mockingly says like, oh, college boy thinks he's so smart. I read into this in two ways because I'm like, oh, it is funny. It is something Dean does. He's always mocking Sam's smartness. But also, I feel like maybe in the background, John mocked Sam to Dean. So Dean does it too. Or it could be like Dean has resentment because Sam got to leave the hunting life. Even if it was only for 2 years, he got to experience something new. So it'd be like resentment, jealousy, or just kind of acting how his dad did, or all of the above.
Yeah, I could see all of those for sure. I can also just see it being his brothers being brothers.
Yeah.
Kind of just like teasing each other. Because like, it is like one of those things that is the difference between them, right? He did go to college. He is like, quote unquote, the smart one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Dean probably knows that. And it's either he's like accepting it and kind of just like making fun of them both kind of for it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In that kind of way of just being like, oh, you think you're so smart, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like teasing him about it. Or he could be doing it a little bit because out of like resentment or like oh, you think you're so smart.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm the hunter,
Yeah,
But
it could definitely be a little bit of all
a
of
little
it.
lighthearted to me. But
Yeah.
definitely with how like dramatic and trauma filled this entire show is, wouldn't surprise me if there's a little bit of that peeking through too.
Exactly. I agree with that. And instead of expanding on this, Sam just changes the subject because this is what they do. They change the subject when things get tough. But Sam changes it to a tougher subject, not on him though. And he says, you know what you said about mom? You never told me that before. Then Dean says, it's no big deal. And then Sam gives him this like brotherly look, like loving look. And then Dean says, oh God, we're not going to have to hug or anything, are we? As Dean is here always deflecting his vulnerability with humor.
Always. Always.
No chick flick moments.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they should hug.
Yes, agree. I'm sure it would help.
Mm-hmm. So they find the house from the drawing and they knock on the door and this old lady answers and he asks if a little boy with a bicycle and a cap live here. And the woman, her acting performance almost made me start crying because she was like, not in a very long time. That was my son. He never came home from school. He disappeared. That was 35 years ago. The police searched and gave up. He was never found. And then she also said the losing a child is worse than dying, just like Bill had said earlier. And then they find an old picture of him and realize Peter and Bill were childhood friends. So that is the the connection. So now we move over to Bill's POV. And he is talking to the water. Looks like a crazy person. He's saying he doesn't understand. He says, like, I don't understand. And then he says, I didn't believe it, but now I do. I know what you want. And as a viewer watching it, I was like, oh, he's going to drown himself. He's going to go in that lake and he's going to drown himself just like how his kids drown. And then Sam and Dean show up just in time to watch him take his boat and go out to the middle of the lake. And then when they get to the end of the dock, as they're saying, like, turn around, whatever, the spirit knocks the boat like way out of the water. It like flies in the air. I don't even know if he died to drowning. He could have died from like getting knocked in the head by a boat.
Yeah, got not hit by the impact.
Right? There is a continuity error here, though. So when they get out of the car and they're running to the dock, Sam is ahead of Dean. And then when they get to the dock, Dean is in front.
Maybe Dean just has better momentum after they get going.
Maybe.
Maybe Sam slows down to let him go, be the hero.
So now we are back at the police station. Andrea and Lucas are there. And Lucas really wanted to tell Dean something. Like he was like tugging on his shoulder. But his mom made him leave. But Lucas was very clearly in distress. But that didn't matter. So now the sheriff takes him to the office and he's like, hey, I know you are not wildlife service. I checked. Then he says, you saw something throw Bill out of his boat and he never appeared again. How am I supposed to believe this when I sonar swept the whole lake? And in my head, I'm like, you've been doing that for 35 years. What? You just did it last week and didn't find somebody. What do you mean? You're just going to say these two guys like killed him and hid the body when this happened like 2 days ago?
Yeah.
It was a very stupid question for him to ask. But then on top of stupid things this cop is doing, he blackmails them and says, I can arrest you for impersonating government officials, or you can leave and forget this town exists and like literally never come back. I think his exact words were like, don't darken my doorstep again. He's like, forget about me and my family in this town. And they were like, oh, okay, well, door number 2 is great. We're going to go do that.
Yeah.
Then the next scene is of Lucas. He's just drawing a circle over and over again. And then it goes back to Dean and they're driving. And instead of turning left, he turns right. And Sam's like, hey, the interstate is that way. And Dean is like, I have a really bad feeling. I need to go check on them. And then Sam is like, well, Bill is dead. Like that should have settled the ghost. So why are you still nervous? And Dean's like, I feel it instinctually. We got to go back. And they get there. Well, okay, worse. Before they get there, we see Andrea is about to get in the bath. And I'm like, why is she taking a bath when people are out here drowning from the pipes? Take a bottled water shower or something outside. But no, she doesn't. Yeah. She gets in the bathtub and the water is black again. So you know it's a spirit. And she's like drowning. And that's when Sam bursts through the door and pulls her out of the water. But you can hear the water whispering, "Come play with me," which is so creepy.
Yeah.
And Amy here, the actress that plays Andrea, she said this scene was kind of scary to film because it was completely dark. She was fake naked and pretending to drown. And the tub was actually full of chocolate milk. That's how they got that brown look. And
Makes
then
sense.
this huge man she doesn't even know has to come in and pull her out of the bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see that being scary. Like, as nice as Jared is, he is he's like 6'5" or something.
Yeah, it's still got to be kind of spooky at first. You know what I mean? The whole situation.
Yes. And then continuity error here is when she gets into the bath, we see the normal water level and it's like right at the edge. But then when the black water starts going into the bath, it's lower.
I genuinely didn't notice. That's hilarious again.
Yeah.
It's funny the things we don't notice, you know, like it just like our brain just like slide over it. Like, that's fine. That makes enough sense where I don't think that's that weird.
Yeah.
One thing I did make a note of, the shot of like her in the bath, like before it started turning like brown.
Mhm.
It reminded me a lot of like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes.
Like the one bathtub scene.
Yeah, I thought
where,
of
the
that
glove
too.
Comes up.
Ugh, so creepy. Yes.
Yeah, that's what it just reminded me of it. I was just like, ooh, if that's not a direct homage again, it's like a very like indirect one. It's pretty like remind me of it a lot.
Mhm.
And again, I love the concept of this ghost, like the way it's killing people, because it's just an interesting concept of like the water pulling you under the water
Mhm.
like that.
Yes.
Like this attempted kill, I thought was a pretty cool too in that way.
Mhm. I did too. And then Lucas takes them outside and is like standing over something. So Sam and Dean are like, "Hey, take Lucas inside." I think they thought they were going to be digging up a body, but instead they dig up a bike, and it makes sense why Lucas was drawing the bikes. However, the bike was only like 2 shovels down. So within 35 years, don't you think the bike would have came up by now, like on their property?
Yeah, no kidding. The thing was very shallowly buried.
Yeah, and with all like the rain and moisture being right next to the lake, there's no way that would have stayed buried for 35 years.
No.
And the cops who should have supposedly been looking for him should have found it. So that was weird to me. They didn't have to dig very far to find it. But conveniently,
Not at all.
as soon as they pull the bike out, the sheriff comes home. This is his house too. And he's like, "I thought you were going to leave." And he's pointing a gun at them. And then Andrea is like, "Lucas, don't come outside because Grandpa's about to shoot somebody." And she's like, "Dad, tell me you didn't kill somebody." And he's like, "Ah." And then he tells this story about how him and Bill accidentally killed Peter because they bullied him because he was really small and they held his head under the water in the lake and he drowned and they just let him go into the lake and then they buried the bike.
Don't be a bully.
No.
Don't do this. Then you'll actually murder someone and then be haunted forever.
Yeah. True. We don't bully around here. You know, and if you do accidentally kill somebody, tell on yourself. Don't become the town sheriff and then have to like cover it up forever.
Yeah.
So then we see Lucas running out to the water and everybody is panicking.
No kidding.
Yes, because now at this point, Peter has pulled Lucas into the water and the sheriff is still like not really even believing that this is a spirit. But then he says Peter's ghostly head sticking out of the water and he like immediately believes.
Looked real, what is it, like grudge-like?
Yes, it did.
That was another thought I had. It looked very grudgy.
As soon as he sees that, he immediately gets into the water and starts saying, like, take me, not him. He's just a kid. Like, this was my fault. Leave my family alone. Things like that.
Mm.
And the sheriff is taken down deep into the lake. And Dean is
R.I.P.
And Dean is now the hero. He saves Lucas. And this is a fun tidbit. At this point, basically every single person is in the water. And they were filming in Vancouver, Canada in April. So the water was very cold. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. That'd have been freezing.
And on top of that, underneath the water, there were like professional divers under to pull them down.
Hate that.
Yeah, so they were kind of just sitting there like treading water and like basically waiting to be pulled under.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much. I mean, it makes sense, but like, oh, that would suck.
Now we fast forward time because the town isn't haunted anymore. And Lucas can talk now. And he specifically made them sandwiches for the road.
Oh,
I know. It's so cute.
what a cutie.
And Dean tells Lucas to say something. And then Lucas says, Zeppelin rules. And he does the like devil horns for rock and roll. Though what's interesting is Led Zeppelin was actually never on the TV show because they couldn't afford it.
That's wild. That's probably why they just referenced it and things like this.
I think so too. Yeah. Bob Singer said that some people are cool about it and some are not. Like some will work with you and your budget and others just won't do it.
Yep.
So, and then Andrea kisses Dean on the lips, which was like, interesting. And then they get in the car and they head out. We're not even told where they're headed to next.
Yep.
They just drive into the sunset.
The most filler of all fillers.
To the crime counter, it's just one, again, impersonating a federal employee. So just 3 more years.
3 more years.
Yep. All right, let's get into our episode rating. So for story and pacing, I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 2.
Oh, that's lower than mine. Why?
Because it just was so slow. Like, I get it. Like, I understand the story wasn't an action story. I get what the intent of everything is. Maybe it just doesn't do it for me personally, but it just was kind of slow. Nothing really happened. And the things that did happen, like the myth and monsters, like that wasn't really a thing much other than like water controlling things. The only like, it was like a vengeful spirit again. Like, just like the first one, as a vengeful spirit, except this time, instead of actually doing anything, the boys just didn't do anything and the problem solved itself.
No, that makes sense.
So it's just like, okay. I mean, like the one precedent it sets for me, like in future things, again, like well, we'll get into it, I guess, on the next thing. So we'll get into those. Kind of relate better to the other topic.
So the next one here is monster lore, and I gave it a 1, and I'm going to tell you I gave it a 1 because there was no lore. There was no monster lore here.
Yeah. I gave it a 3. I was a little more generous just because like the whole haunted lake thing is kind of a cool thing that actually is kind of real, and it relates to a lot of like the fears that we all have like in all our myths about like creatures dragging you under. So like I thought it was kind of cool that way in terms of lore. I did take a couple points off, obviously, because it just is a rehash of another vengeful spirit thing where it's just like, okay. The one, like, again, it's like the only vengeful spirit thing they kind of added to like the lore was that sometimes they don't need to directly intervene if it's like a vengeful thing. It just needs to get its thing done.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, so it's like, okay, I'll give you a little bit of extra points there. So,
yeah, I just didn't.
Why'd you give it a 1?
Well, because there wasn't any, like, they didn't explain anything. Like,
True.
They never even said it was a vengeful spirit. They just found out it was like.
They said that once. Like,
oh, did they?
Thing at least once in it, but like it was not like explained further than just calling it that.
Yes. And something they did
So-
mention was they were like, we can salt and burn the bones. But then they didn't explain why. They just said, like, this is
Yeah.
a thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And like, then they found the bike. I was like, well, why wouldn't they even discuss burning the bike? Because they burn, like, as if it's like a valuable
Possessed
possession,
item.
or like, not possessed item, but like the valuable possessions that ghosts can like cling to. So even if their body,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Oh.
Yeah, like using it as like an anchor almost.
yeah. So I was just like, I don't know, there wasn't really lore in this, so it's just like,
Yeah.
meh.
Valid.
Character development, I gave it a 3.
I also gave it a 3.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense because we learn kind of we learn more about Dean,
A little.
just a little bit. But
Yeah, so like we develop more about Dean's specific traumas and stuff, but it's like, okay, it wasn't like, I don't know, like it didn't feel as like much happened.
Mhm.
Like these are all relevant still, and they kind of lead to the whole picture, but like we get like the whole, that's why I gave it a 3. I thought it was like middle of the road. There was a couple
Mhm.
pieces, like you said. And then also just like even like the fatherly thing, that's another thing that's like kind of established here that keeps going. But it's like, I don't know. It was fine.
Yeah, definitely. And then visuals and direction, I gave a 4.
I also gave a 4.
I liked all the references to the other movies, even if they were unintentional.
Same. That's why I gave mine so high too.
Yeah, it was nice. You can tell this director, they did the best with the material they had.
Yeah, and it's a very low budget, very simple episode, but they did pretty good. I thought with turning into like feeling kind of like the slashery vibe
Mhm.
too, like, especially at the beginning. I thought the beginning shot was really cool, especially with the grainy footage of like this different filming style.
Mhm.
Like it lend itself very well to the opening of this as like an homage to 80s slashers, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Emotional impact, I gave it a 4. And before you say your answer, I'm going to say why. So I originally had it lower. And then when I was writing out my notes and I started writing that old woman had a very good performance of her, like, her being sad that her son was gone and never found. And I was like, that really hit me like emotionally. Like she is like the MVP of this episode. And then learning more about Dean's trauma and then them calling back the army toys, like all of that together. I was like, okay, this needs to be raised because it did have an emotional impact on me.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I and like hearing you say that, and like hearing you discuss.
Mhm.
I even be considered bumping mine up to like a 3 even.
But
But I have it at a 2 because like it just didn't do much for me. Like I never really felt a lot in this episode. But like the army men thing in particular is like that's like a very touching thing I didn't think about. I didn't
Mhm.
notice. But yeah, like it just didn't do a ton for me. So I gave it a 2.
Makes
Kinda, yeah.
sense. Mhm. Rewatchability, I gave it a 2.
1. I don't like this episode. I apologize if this is your favorite episode. I don't know how, but good for you. I don't like it. I would not voluntarily rewatch it to the point where like when I was doing my second rewatch, I was basically zoning out half the time and like having to just focus on something else because I just could
Mhm.
not get through it very well. It just didn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, I went back and forth between 1 and 2 and just kind of settled on 2. So I was like, well, I mean, I could rewatch it. I'm kind of holding
Yeah.
out my ones for like bad. And I know
Fair.
when that will show up.
Yeah, but to me, like boring is also bad.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
I wouldn't want to rewatch it because I'm bored of it.
So if I said, hey, let's watch Supernatural season 1, episode 3, you would be like, no.
I'd be like, I'm good.
I love it.
I'd rather watch the first episode again.
Yeah. All right. And my last one is Salt and Sass. And I'll just remind that this one is like, did it have good banter, tropes, iconic lines, things like that?
Yeah.
I gave it a 2.
I also gave it a 2. We have like the same kind of vibe for the most part of this episode, I feel.
Yeah, because like there was the good banter we talked about with like the pickup line.
Yeah,
And
there's
the
a couple good
tropes.
one-liners.
There wasn't any
but
like
it wasn't like
it wasn't iconic like the first 2
we were
episodes.
literally like, yeah, we have the same brain about this entire thing. I was gonna say the exact same thing. I was trying to let you finish it.
Mhm.
Exactly. Just they had a couple of really good lines, and that's it. And they are like they're fairly rememberable. I only really remember them because you had them in your notes. If you didn't have them in your notes, I could have like been like, yeah, there wasn't even any one-liners with each other. That was weird
Mhm.
because like they weren't that rememberable. It's like, oh, this is amazing. It's like, oh, okay.
Mhm. So my average score is a 2.71 out of 5.
And I had a 2.43 out of 5. So yeah, pretty much the same. Just a couple, just slightly over under 2.5.
Our combined score is 2.57. So
yeah, so 2.5. Yep,
this is a less than average episode.
it's fine. Like it's a filler episode, whether the writers call it that or not. It's still a filler episode, and it can be just missed or rewatched it whenever, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But do you have anything else to add?
Nope, I think that does it for our trip to the lake. So that brings us to the end of the season 1, episode 3, Dead in the Water. Thank you all for joining us this week. Next week, we are headed toward a demonic flight, which is the freaking awesome episode. So that'll be fun. But whenever you're ready, we'll see you in the archive.
Bye.